From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. All right, welcome to the Acres USA podcast. Today I'm joined with AJ Richards, ranching advocate, entrepreneur, and CEO of FromTheFarm.org. AJ comes from deep Western ranching roots and has spent the last several years working at the intersection of food, technology, and policy, building tools to help farmers and ranchers connect directly with consumers while keeping ownership, pricing power, and integrity in their hands. AJ, welcome to the Acres USA podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Taylor. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I've followed you for quite a while. I think even probably before I had bought Acres, and really appreciate the work. And you have a pretty big platform that you can talk about some of these important pieces. But what's kind of like the background? How do we get to where you are today? And you're obviously really passionate about helping ranchers. So
Yeah,
how do we get here?
yeah. Family are into the sixth generation of ranching now in Utah, Arizona area. My cousin is actually Ammon Bundy. My grandma's brother's Cliven Bundy. So the Bundy ranchers. That's my family history. Grew up as the city slicker cousin, so I got to do the brandings and the cattle drives, but I wasn't raised on the ranch. I always kind of joke and tell people if my mom was my dad, I'd be a rancher. But I think God, the creator, has plans for us, and we go through different things in life to be set up for that. But my uncle told me once when I was younger, if you want to be a millionaire rancher, start with 10 and you'll lose it all. So I spent my younger adult life trying to become that multimillionaire to buy a ranch. That's not easy to do. It didn't happen. And so finally I just said, you know what? I've been doing all of these side projects, side quests to try to become a producer. Let me just go get into ag. So I called a cousin of mine and started selling beef for his ranch in 2019. And then COVID hit. We couldn't get slaughter. It was a year and a half wait. We bounced all over the state of Utah, squeezing into any slaughterhouse that had a cancellation. And we just struggled to try to keep that direct to consumer business that was growing going. But if you have 50 clients a month or 50 customers a month that are getting a monthly box and you can't even process for them, there's no growth. So we struggled to try to keep it alive, and it was all really hinged on access to slaughter.
I think that's a really important timeline right there, because that disrupted the cattle industry, more than anything. Do you want to give a little bit of a background? So, like, what personally were you guys experiencing? Essentially, the slaughterhouses were shut down for a period of time, which then backlogged everything, and then you couldn't get on the books? Or
for us,
what was your perspective?
Yeah, for us, slaughter never shut down. These were small mom and pop operations that were going to show up hell or high water. And so they were going, but as anybody that understands probably the listeners here, it's the downstream effect that when the bigger processors closed, it just created, all the cars went off the rails behind it. So we would call to get slaughter, and they'd say, okay, how many? And we'd tell them, 5 or so. And they say, great, we got spots for you in 2 weeks. COVID hit, and we called the same sort of regiment, and they're like, oh, we can get you in a year and a half. And we're like, what the hell? And that was almost overnight. Like, we didn't see it coming at all. And honestly, I wasn't connected to
when would you say, so like COVID, to me, like COVID D-Day was whatever, that second week in March. Was it like the next week?
It was
because when did the big slaughterhouses shut down? They shut down.
Yeah, right.
How long did they shut down?
Well, if I remember right, it was right there in March, and it was for a couple of weeks, then ongoing, because people were sick. So when they said, oh, you are an essential business, go back to work, they still had staffing issues. And so we saw that change by April. I mean, it was that quick.
Yeah.
I mean, but it makes sense when you have a slaughterhouse that's processing 6,000 head in a day. That means 6,000 head are ready to go tomorrow, and then the next day and the next day. You shut down that end line, it's not going to take long for the rails to fall off. So people were just
Yeah, for
flooding the
sure.
slaughterhouses. It was much cheaper to store frozen beef than feed an animal on four legs when you had no idea what, when that was going to be done.
Yeah. So what drove the price of cattle down in as a result of that? Essentially, there just wasn't enough animals getting slaughtered during that time, so people had to, I mean, you hear the stories about in the feedlots where animals were getting over 2,000 pounds and dying of heart attacks because, they
Yeah.
weren't meant to live longer than 14 months.
Yeah, they were obese and chronically ill.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the pricing side, I wasn't that tied in early on. I wasn't really tied into the understanding the pricing and the markets until the
Yeah.
last couple of years. So I don't know that what affected it then. I just know the supply chain in order to get food was falling apart. People were dumping millions of gallons of milk and burying produce, and
Hmm.
because our system is designed, we've separated the consumer so far from the origin of the food. You've got the logistics, you got the packaging and the warehousing and the processing center. I mean, all of those are one step removing the consumer from production, which did a good job for us in the last 70 years to get to where we're at, but it wasn't sustainable. So now it's falling apart. We're too far away. Slaughterhouses are down to like under 3,000 or something like that in the whole country.
Yeah.
Less than 40 slaughterhouses process 80% of the meat we consume. And I look at
Yeah.
slaughterhouses as soft targets. Having a military background, I look at that from an infrastructure standpoint. I'm like, man, you burn down half of those or 10 of those. What does that do to our nation's supply chain as a whole when they're moving that much, beef? So we need to get our small local slaughterhouses back up and running. Consumers need to know that that's even an option. We moved to Cody, Wyoming, as part of my R&D for From the Farm, and we bought a slaughterhouse with some partners. And so I ran a small USDA, 35 head a week here in Cody, and got sort of my feet wet to understand that aspect of it. And you know, you need, at a small scale, you need a portion of that to go retail in order to stay viable. If I can only process 35 head a week and those are just custom for other producers, I have like, my kill fee and then my cut and wrap fee. I wouldn't have, you're not even in the black if all I'm doing is processing custom. And from the producer side, the cost of processing has gone up. They think it's too expensive, but yet we're not even staying open at, you know, $1.20 a pound cut and wrap. And so that small scale of a slaughterhouse needs to have a portion of that bringing in retail value, whether it's meat or value added snack sticks or jerkies or something. We just needed some of that retail dollar to cover to make it profitable. So
Yeah. I mean, you think back, you turn the clock back 50 years and you have, because I think the solution is to kind of look back a little bit, is a bunch of entrepreneurs in rural landscapes, developing successful, economically viable businesses around agriculture. And slaughterhouse is an easy one. That could be someone that has the entrepreneur bug. They might be cutting meat somewhere right now. If they had a chance to get into a business like that, I mean, that we had, I think about our community, there was probably, you know 10 or so in a 20-mile radius that you could go to, and now it's, you lose them left and right,
yeah,
uh, consistently. And it's almost like when the parents or whatever family owns it, I haven't seen one, essentially the torch get picked up with the next generation to continue on. So what is some of the challenges, like where's the overhead come in that makes it so difficult for these smaller processors to survive? And then it trickles down to us. Like, I just took two animals in yesterday to our local processor. It's 1,200 to $1,400 for me to get all my cuts back to me.
yeah,
And we're selling, maybe a full beef at, now we're pushing, everything said and done, 4,500 to 5,000. But that's a quarter of the revenue right there. And a couple of years ago when it was a little bit cheaper, obviously I was buying stockers cheaper. It was a third of the revenue.
Yeah.
So where's that overhead come from?
My experience, it was labor costs and power,
Right.
right? Because you're cooling you got your aging coolers that are running tons of power, and then you got your freezers that are running tons of power. So the highest line items that I remember is our labor costs and then our power costs. Labor costs were higher for us because there was no skilled labor. So what a highly skilled butcher could do, we needed two or three guys to do, and it was terrible.
Yeah,
I mean, you just don't have the knowledge anymore. Meat cutting is a skill,
for
and
sure.
you go to the big plants, and that person's job is one cut, and then it goes down the line to the next person. They make a cut, and then the next person makes a cut, and now you've got your roast. You know what I mean? Like it's not, they're not skilled labor. It's just standing there doing the same thing all day. But in a small processing facility, you need somebody that can break down a whole carcass and get it to the specifications that the customer wants, and make sure that if they want 1.5 inch steaks, it's actually 1.5 inch, and you don't have but yeah, labor was our biggest challenge. Turnover was a challenge. And so that's what I would say. Our biggest overhead was in those two areas, power and
So,
labor.
and then capital probably as well. Like it's not a cheap thing to get into.
No,
It's not a
no.
cheap building to buy. It's not, you don't have cheap equipment. So then, we also have the fluctuating, I don't know if you want to dive into the actual economics behind it, but like if you didn't pay cash for it, you're probably on a floating type of, not a locked interest rate. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like you know, are you still operating this slaughterhouse right now? Or did you
Nope.
guys move on?
That slaughterhouse is still in operation by the partners I joined in. We just uh, didn't see eye to eye on how to operate it, and so
Mm-hmm.
I needed to step out. And frankly, that was necessary because of this, from the farm, what we're doing now. I was, like I said, it was part of R&D of what I was trying to figure out for this platform, and owning the slaughterhouse or being connected to that side of it, I hadn't learned yet. And so but on the economic side, like this slaughterhouse here was purchased for about 1.5 million, but it was built in 1950, and so it's fallen apart. I mean, if I would have seen, I didn't
So
get.
like on that like sale of that building, like on the balance sheet that they give you,
Mhm.
obviously probably a majority of that sale is coming into the infrastructure costs that
Yep,
they are holding on to.
yep.
Um, so like you have your coolers, the building, what are the high priced items that drive that cost up? And then obviously you said it's an older building, so there's probably a lot of improvements you guys had to make.
Yep. So the building itself, frankly, I wasn't part of the negotiating on that side. My job was more connecting with the producers and building the white label downstream. But it actually ended up in a lawsuit issue because misrepresentation of what the value was. And so that's for us, that's a very skewed question because a lawsuit did follow. But basically, what they had is the cost of the building. They valued the business itself at a certain dollar amount, the brand, right, which was not worth what they were valuing it at because of where we live, and they didn't have a steady stream of customers and so forth in terms of retail side. Um, and then the other items on the list was all the equipment that was inside the building. The the grinding machines and the band saws, like all the individual equipment was all itemized in there. And we found quite a bit of equipment later on that was listed that was never actually there. So it's your building, it's the brand that building comes with, if there is one, and or the brand of the business, and then the equipment valuation was what it was sold on.
So I could see a bank helping lend on the real estate itself, but I would suspect the bank would not be that interested in the equipment.
No, and in this particular case, the buyer didn't need a bank. My partner didn't need a bank.
Okay,
He
so
was
that's good.
flush with capital. So, I mean, in fact, when we saw the listing, we owned it within 4 months, and I was living here. I mean, it was quick.
So if you were to talk to that guy now, I guess my thought would be, if you throw all your cash out at the sale and then these problems come up afterwards, it's a lot harder to recoup these issues.
Yeah.
Do you think he would have rather, and you maybe had a little bit more flexibility if you'd have put half down and then done, more seller financing for 5 years, and then these issues arose, then it's a lot easier to argue in court because at least you still can hold your cash.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And this particular situation, this plant wouldn't be open still had the guy that bought it not had a lot of capital and a lot of success to do this. It just wouldn't still be here.
Because the people that were there probably needed it to exit.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. So it was a very
it's a tough situation.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I was only supposed to be here to connect the producers with our brand, so buy their livestock and then sell it with our brand on it. That was my role here. But within about 4 months of being here, we had to fire the plant manager. He misrepresented himself. And in a small town like the one we're in, you're not finding a replacement to run a plant that knows what they're doing. And so at that point, I had the most to lose. I'd uprooted my whole family, moved us to a new state where we had no family, bought a house. I mean, we sunk our roots here in the community. So at that point, it was, looking in the mirror and saying, who's got the most to lose that's going to do their damnedest to try to save it. And unfortunately it was me. And I will, so having no plan to run a slaughterhouse, having no experience at all, now I'm running a slaughterhouse. And my wife was the bookkeeper because there was we just, trying to make it work. We didn't do a good job. I would like to say that we rose to the occasion. That it's such a complicated business that it just wasn't something I was trying to become an expert at. And so, but what it did teach me was the importance of shoring up our processing side that I was not intimately aware of until I got into it, and then became a lot more aware of that need, which is actually why we started allowing our platform is only for family-owned farms and ranches, people producing food or cottage makers to sell and connect to consumers. And I wasn't going to allow slaughterhouses to be on the platform and sell. But after running the slaughterhouse and seeing, like, if these guys aren't viable, we're in trouble. Like, the whole supply chain needs supported. So we opened up the software for small family-owned slaughterhouses to sell their own product direct to consumer. The reason I wasn't going to allow it is I was concerned with the concept or the idea that if this works really well and my slaughterhouse could sell 100% of what it's slaughtered with our own label, then we take that processor out of the supply chain for the individual producer. So that was my initial concern, where I was like, we can't do this, or it could cause a bigger problem. But if we lose them anyway because they're going bankrupt and they don't have the same marketing support they need, then we're also screwed. So having run one, I was like, okay, most of the guys I know that run small slaughterhouses don't want to stop processing for their neighbors. And so I think I'm hoping that they will manage that appropriately for what that community's needs are. And heck, worst case scenario, they are selling out, which signals to other potential entrepreneurs that, hey, there's a viable business here. We need more. And so more slaughterhouses will be built.
Hey everybody, this year's 50th annual Acres USA EcoEgg Conference was one for the record books. And now you can relive many of the inspiring moments. The 2025 EcoEgg recordings are now available for purchase, featuring all keynotes, breakout sessions, and other expert presentations from the nation's leading ecological ag thinkers and practitioners such as Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, John Kemp, Nasha Winters, Dr. Don Huber, and many more. There's over 30 presentations. Whether you're a farmer, rancher, educator, or ag professional, these recordings put the best of sustainable agriculture at your fingertips, so you can learn at your pace, revisit ideas, and take your operation to the next level. Don't miss out and head to the link in the show notes and get your complete set of the 2025 EcoEgg recordings today. Your soil, your farm, and your future will thank you. Yeah. I had a couple questions on that. So a lot of people will talk about, it being a USDA certified slaughter plant. Number one, is it worth being USDA certified when you're doing 35 animals a week, or would you just do a state inspected and get away with it and be fine?
Yep. Yeah, that's you go ahead.
And I was just going to say, people will say that the USDA label, then you have to, it's not like a free service the USDA gives you. Talk about the economics, I guess,
Yeah.
being USDA certified versus state inspected. And then, are you're paying part of the salary of that inspector, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So with USDA, there's certain things that you aren't allowed to do while they're not on site. So your operation as a USDA inspected plant is on hold unless you have an inspector there for you to keep working. So if you want to work weekends to catch up, you're paying overtime. If you want to work holidays, you're paying overtime. If you go over the hours on the day, you're paying the USDA overtime. And so that line item there keeps a lot of people from running extra hours just to be able to keep up or to make more revenue, because by the time you pencil out the wage of your USDA rep, it doesn't make sense. And so we didn't
So
do.
who is that? Who is that person? That guy? That's just a US. They just bring him in. Is it someone
Yep.
local that they find, or?
Nope, they're moved in from wherever the USDA wants them, takes them from, and moves them into your area because you need one, um and that's where they come from.
So
So
they need to be there when the animal gets slaughtered, and then when value added activities happen, do they need to be there as well?
yep, we can't cut and wrap without them there. So let's say we've got a
That's
whole bunch to
wild.
catch up with, and we could do that, and our employees are like, yeah, we'd love to come in, we'd love the overtime. It sometimes it doesn't pencil out to add the USDA person on the back end of that. Now, in terms of whether it's worth it or not, I think that depends on where you live. So I'm in Cody, Wyoming. We're in the middle of nowhere, and our state only has 500,000 people, and many of those 500,000 people are also raising livestock. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't need to come to Wyoming Legacy to get beef, right? They can go to any one of these other areas or process it themselves. So we just don't have the customer base. So in order for us to be able to sell at any volume that would matter, we had to be USDA so that we could sell it online and send it across state lines. If I was in, let's say if I was in Utah, I probably wouldn't go USDA because I'd have enough consumers within Utah that I would just be state inspected and do it that way. State inspected requires you to follow all of the same guidelines, if not higher than USDA, but you don't have a USDA rep looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
And how is that? How is that person to work with?
oh man, it was a luck of the draw. It was either
Yeah. Right.
it was either Greg Gunthorpe says it pretty good. He says 80% of your inspectors are great, but you have 10% that are lazies and 10% that are crazies. I've met them
Just like
all.
the NRCS.
Yep, exactly. And I've met them all. So, our USDA rep here at this slaughterhouse was phenomenal. We had a great working relationship. In fact, we kind of created this environment of I'm going to tag it before you see it. So our staff was trained to tag something out that needed remediation or whatever before the USDA did, as sort of a game. Like, I'm going to catch it before you do. But she was easy
Mm-hmm.
to work with, and so it was kind of fun. And if something
So what are they doing the whole time? Like, are they picking a knife up and helping out, or
no
like you
no
got a body in this room all day? Like, what are they? They can't inspect. They can't take that long to inspect. They literally just sitting there watching everybody.
yeah, it depends on the floor they're on, right? So if they're on the kill floor, they're watching for things like if you go to knock an animal and it doesn't drop right away, they're watching that, and then they're watching your procedures after that. If you're cutting the animal open and it's got cysts or whatever, they're looking for all of those kinds of things inside the carcass. When you send it through to the other side where it's processed, now they're watching to see, is anything hitting the ground? Of course, that's not a bad thing. You want to make sure you're not, you're sanitary, but they're looking for those kinds of things. Or just really, you have man, this is going to show my my level of knowledge. It's your crap. I'm sorry. It's a plan that you write. The name is just skipping me. You write this whole plan on how every level of your plant is going to operate. And then that plan is what technically the USDA is going off of. So that's sort of your argument. And most of the time, they don't care what's in your plan, they just expect you to follow it. So if there's a new procedure that you learn works better, it's your HACCP plan. Sorry, that's the name, HACCP plan. Hazard analysis, something. Anyway, so you create the plan of how you're going to run, it gets approved, and then they just expect you to follow that. But a lot of times you'll end up butting heads because they'll say that you can't do something. You say it's in my HACCP, I can do it. They want to argue back and forth. Then you got to get their supervisor on the phone. And anytime we had the supervisor get on the phone, most of the time it went in our favor. But yeah, it's a luck of the draw. Because then I went after I left this slaughterhouse, I consulted for a jerky plant in Lincoln, Montana, and then I helped consult for a new slaughterhouse that does 200 head a day in Utah. And when I went to the plant in Montana, the inspector, the USDA inspector, was holding up $500,000 in inventory because the package. So this package they've had it for like 20 years. Nothing's changed. And it's got graphics on the front and back. And on the back, there's a little window that there's this stylistic writing on it that says made from premium cuts of beef. They've been doing it that way. So you can see the, jerky through this little window. They've been doing it that way for 20 years, no problem. This new USDA rep comes in and she says, how do I know that's premium cuts of meat? That's mislabeling. And so she stopped $500,000 of shipments that had been going on like that, had been approved and no problem with previous inspectors or anybody all the way up to that point. We ended up having to have almost every representative of Montana come in and tour the facility, look at the problem we were dealing with, and then they put enough pressure that they finally let it go. But by that time, we'd already lost contracts with some of our distributors, like gas stations, because the order didn't show up. It was held up for so long, they had to find a replacement. So we lost our shelf space.
So where are you selling most of these? Like gas stations, smaller?
That company was, gas stations. Yeah. Walmart was a customer. So yeah.
You burned Walmart one time. I'm assuming you're not getting back in.
Yep. So, and all because of an inspector that stepped out of her lane and caused problems for us.
So another thing with these products, like you made the comment, like one way for them to make it is these value-added products like snack sticks and summer sausage. That's a skill in itself though too. Like that can't just be we've had a hard time finding solid, well-made value-added products like that I feel comfortable enough to sell.
Yep, that's right. And it might have changed in the last year, but about a year ago I was talking to a lot of these small plant owners and other folks that were connected there. And they said that one of the biggest needs is, if for an entrepreneur, is a value added facility. That's all they do is they make really good snack sticks, jerky, and whatever value added other products they want to do. But that's all they do. They're not killing, they're not processing. You just send all your trim over there or whatever it is you're having produced, and then they make it. Because local value-added products are becoming highly sought after. And so, but when you try to do all of that within the same facility that's small, doing all the other things, this plant here, I'm still friends and support the owner. And so whenever they come to town, we get together, but they're adding 3,500 square feet of processing space for value-added products. These guys are actually shifting their focus. One of our issues is because we're so remote, anything we sold direct to consumer was only being sent out 2-day air. Well, that adds a lot more cost to that for the customer. So that was one of the challenges we dealt with here. So this particular facility is now going to process dog treats that are medicated. So they've got glucosamine and things like, joint health and stuff like that for pets. That happens to be the owner's background for human supplements. And so they're like, hey, let's do dog treats. Well, for this particular plant, it's brilliant because dog treats are shelf stable. So now they're no longer dependent on refrigerated trucking or anything like that to get it out of Wyoming and across the nation. So I think it was a smart pivot for these guys to do that. And they need that to be profitable because they're not profitable doing custom.
Yeah, and from our perspective, I did find that, and like we did a load of hogs this year where I took the trim and got better products made.
Mm,
But then you're in a position where they're pretty expensive when it's all said and done
yep.
for us to make it make sense.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
it's just a tough and then you can get into like, obviously consumer education or something like that. But
Yeah. Yeah. Consumer education, I feel like, is if there was any, all these things that the USDA is now doing, a lot of it's really good, and it's, they're scratching the surface. They're just getting started. But ultimately, none of it matters if the consumers are not re-educated. Because, and I say re-educated because they're just simply not anymore. 98% of the people you talk to have no clue about the origin of their food, right? And so I'm kind of a broken record in DC talking about, if you're going to put programs together, you need to be focused on a program that promotes buying from your local farmers and ranchers at the same scale we promoted Victory Gardens in World War II. Because we are in a pretty terrible spot when it comes to our food system as a whole. I mean, I feel like it's a national security issue. I feel like one more black swan like COVID, and we'd be in a whole world of trouble because we haven't even recouped from the last, from COVID.
no, it's
So
been I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. You look back now, we're 6 years away from that, and just the disruption that it's caused, and it's ridiculous. I think it's a difficult thing to push on people because in their head, I think a normal person thinks that, well, if I just buy an animal or buy beef from the person down the road, it's going to be cheaper than
yep,
what I get at Walmart,
right,
right? Because why wouldn't it be? I'm getting it right from the source. But there's just no way for us to compete even close with Walmart pricing.
yeah. That's why, like, and I don't know how to do this. I'm trying to figure out how to do this, but I think the education needs to be offered is beyond the value of the nutrition, and really get real with people. Like, the fact is, we can talk about nutrition as the priority, but if the food system continues to decline and we have less and less food, what will matter is that you even have anything to put in your stomach. That's not, I guess the good news is they've already got all the infrastructure for lab grown and fake meat in place, so we probably won't ever starve. We'll just be eating crap we don't want. you know
Maybe
but
they're all bankrupt now though.
yeah, well, exactly. But the education that needs to be offered is like big picture. Like, if you buy in from your local farmer and rancher now, that means they're going to be there for you in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. It's not just about the nutritional value. It's about ensuring that we have producers as an option, right? Family farms, especially, not big corporate infrastructure interests, which I think that's one of our biggest challenges that's coming, is because the cost to get into food production, I shouldn't say most, but many of the people getting into it now are investment funds that pull all this money together, that are bankrolling land on its land value, not on the fact that it produces food. And
Yeah.
so, if I wanted to go ranch, I couldn't afford to do that where I'm at. I couldn't afford the land.
Well, you're forced to beg for access
Yeah,
or rent.
yeah, rent.
Yeah.
That'd be the only way I do it here, which I do plan to someday, but it's just going to be leased.
Yeah. My new arguments, like the cost of everything has increased so much. I just looked up like a double quarter pounder meal right now at McDonald's is $12.50 to $14. It's not $5 anymore. And like our target for our ground beef is like, if we can sell our ground beef for $10 a pound, then everything else kind of works out. Um, you're getting a half a pound of beef there in theory. I'd argue if you're probably not. And then you're adding, fries and a soda and a bun. Like, I think we're out ahead people buying beef from us, but
yeah,
you have to cook it, and then you don't get your fries and soda.
yeah,
But
that's right. Yeah, that consumer education is it's crucial. I mean, people need to know that what they're getting, where they're getting it from, what the value, what the nutritional value is, and that's all part of the education side. We used to spend 30% of our budget on food and 8% on healthcare. And highly processed food, or food that comes from a system that the only interest was efficiency and revenue, there's just a lack of knowledge that what it actually costs to produce that food. And now our healthcare cost, now I think I just heard somewhere our food budget is 6% now. I mean, that's not true. It's what we have been led to believe, which is the challenge. The consumer thinks that their food cost should only be 6%, but it's not true. If that, to your point, when they ask their local producer what the cost is, they're surprised, but they don't understand the fuel costs and the feed costs and the labor costs. If a producer's even adding labor in there, most of them don't. They just, yeah.
Well, and I think processing is probably the biggest ones. The big dogs aren't paying $1,200 to process one animal.
No, they're not.
I'm sure you have any idea what their costs are at?
It's probably closer to, I don't know. It's probably closer to 800. And I say that because I'm talking to a group right now that's trying to put the capital together to buy up a bunch of or partner with a bunch of small slaughterhouses. And they have a model where it's an $800 processing fee. That's it. Now,
yeah,
it's also,
so you'd expect the big one. I mean, in my head, I've always thought like 500 to 600, because like how else? I mean, those guys, how else are they making it work right now either? I mean, they're paying a lot for fat cattle right now.
Yeah. The other side of that too, though, is the labor costs for you are going to be different for the big guys, because one of the reasons is because they're cutting into boxed beef. So they're doing whole primals and then sending that off to a grocery store. But when you take each primal and cut it into individual steaks, you're adding quite a bit of labor. So you are going to have to pay more to have it cut to order, essentially, than going through a big slaughterhouse that everything's just being, put into primals and send out in boxed beef.
Yeah. You want to talk about, so FromTheFarm.org is a platform that is solving some of these issues, right?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. So From the Farm was a vision that came to me in 2020, pretty much when everything was falling apart. I'm like, man, stores are talking about, limiting what you can buy and empty store shelves, but yet there's all these fat cattle standing in the field that my cousin's ready to sell, and the consumer just doesn't know how to connect with him, right? There's that disconnect. And so I thought, if somebody could build a system similar to Airbnb, basically that makes, what Airbnb did so brilliantly is they handled all of the components in the middle between the renter and the rentee, and made that so easy that anybody with a spare bedroom or a house could throw it on there and all the work would be done. It just had to be available. So that's our attempt with From the Farm, is to build an ecosystem that we start taking on all of these individual challenges, but most importantly, drive a number of consumers to one location where they can then easily find that producer close to them. And do it in a way that prioritizes the producer's needs first. So on our platform, we don't take any commission off the sell of food. We do make money in a couple of other areas that are part of the ecosystem, but I wanted to build something that gave the producer 100% of the retail dollar that they need. And so our goal is to bring revenue for our company in from all of the components that attach to that, like shipping, like software fees, packaging. If we can aggregate and become a packaging distributor, I can reduce the cost for the producers on their boxes, insulation, and gel packs, but then have a small margin. So we actually have to build an ecosystem that's very complicated to make the revenue necessary in order to make sure the producer keeps 100% of that retail dollar. So we're trying to cut out as many middlemen as we can and not become the middleman, right? And so it's a very,
you're taking cuts of all the things that they need to be able to ship their meat, but then they're still getting it at a better deal than if they were to go source it themselves.
Yeah, and it's actually, so on From the Farm, we have 100 producers on there, and they've all built their own store. So
Right.
think about it like if you could go to Shopify.com, and Shopify.com, instead of a website to build a website, if that Shopify.com was a marketplace for all of everybody that has a Shopify website, and then you could go to each website from that homepage. That's what From the Farm is. You go to fromthefarm.org. Any farm you click on is run and managed and operated by that producer and their family themselves. So we're not in the middle. In fact, when a customer service issue arises, it's between the consumer and the producer. We'll support where we need to, but we give our producers the name, the phone number, the email address, everything that comes with that consumer buying. I'm not gatekeeping it. It's your customer. Even we helped you get them, but it's your customer. So you can retarget them, you can follow up with them. Um, so yeah, that's what we got 100 producers selling all kinds of stuff: dairy, eggs, beef, lamb, chicken. I've got somebody selling donkey milk. We have people that are selling wool. So if you grow it or produce it, you can build a store on there. And over time, our goal is to bring enough traffic that you can stop marketing altogether. Because
Yeah.
when you look at that individual operation as a small producer, if you want to go direct, the amount of work you just added to your already full day, now
Yeah,
you're in
it's
the
a whole
field.
other business.
Yeah,
It's a whole other business. It's the number one issue is that it's a entirely separate business. Um, and I was fortunate where I came from. I had a marketing agency so I was able to build my own websites, and I understood the back end of these things. But for someone it's just an unfair ask of someone to say, because the goal is that we have hundreds of thousands of these farms that are able to do that,
that's right.
and for hundreds of thousands of farmers to be able to build websites and handle those things. But how do you guys handle the quality control? Because my opinion is, uh, you know, these farms want to do well
Yep.
for their customer,
Yep.
and it's an inherent thing in their soul that they don't want to be told that their product sucks. So like I think a lot of the quality control probably gets handled that way, but like how do you guys make sure your brand doesn't get a bad rap for someone who doesn't perform on that end? Hey, eco farmers, this is Taylor Henry with Acres USA. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource you need to check out: the Acres USA membership. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres USA magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres USA, but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. Finally, if you are like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. To make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we're constantly working through.
Yeah,
Because it would be much easier for us to sell branded From the Farm beef and just
right.
have a network of producers throughout the country and just become another Butcher Box or Good Rancher or whatever. That would be way easier, because then you're just removing so many of the working components. But now I'm the middleman for the people I'm buying from, and I know they need the retail dollar. So we don't have this developed yet, but our goal is to do basically like on Airbnb. Customers can rate producers and producers can rate customers. So I'm hoping that we can build a system that's sort of self-correcting, and now it's up to the producer. Now in that model, in that plan, we will audit reviews that are like below 3 stars to make sure it's not just some, you know, crazy environmentalist that's just trying to hurt people. But We just want the community to sort of self-regulate, so we're not handling that. And we've had those issues. We've had an order, order not get placed. We've had orders that didn't show up in time or weren't packaged properly. We haven't had any orders where the quality of the product was the problem. That's a good thing, because I agree with you. If you're selling direct, you're putting your personal brand on that. It's not hiding behind some big corporate white label. And the producers I worked with, that's one of their biggest fears, is to sell something to a customer and them tell them it's not good. Like
Well, and it's an issue that, it goes both ways. Like the farmer, I think a lot of people get beat themselves up over someone making a negative comment. If you get grass-fed beef for the first time, you've never had it before, there's a chance you might not really like the flavor of it. That's not. And then a farmer could, if someone says that was disgusting, a farmer could be like, well, why am I even doing this? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yep.
I'm going to stop.
Yep. And that's why we want the producer to be able to rate the consumer as well, because
right.
I've done 3 different direct to consumer meat companies, and you get consumers in there that they're not going to be happy no matter what, and they're going to cause.
That's just business.
Yeah.
It's just business.
Yep. So,
and that's part of the reason why farmers would rather just sell to this, faceless thing that they don't have to deal with.
Yep. Yep, exactly. But then it's like right now, cattle prices are so high, folks are like, why would I even add the extra work of going direct? And they're
right.
They're
so
not.
Let's talk about that a little bit,
Yeah.
because that's one thing I am concerned about. Number one, like I just took 2 animals in yesterday. I could have taken them down the road today and had my hands clean of everything, and there's a chance I end up making more profit in the end. I am concerned about folks who have built up a direct-to-consumer business, because when I first bought my first head of cattle in 21, I paid $1.25 for 500 pounders. Like our target this spring is probably $3.50 to $4. That's a giant jump.
Yep.
In that sort of business, if you're buying stockers and finishing them. So what I am worried about these higher prices, where these direct-to-consumer people kind of just take them down to the sales barn, but then they lose the customers, because their customer base is the most difficult thing to build.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I try to maybe help them understand, is if, first of all, we got to keep in mind that 86% of our producers in our nation are considered small, 350,000 a year in revenue or less. So they've all got off farm jobs. If you're that small, that check from the sell barn is great. But what happens when the bottom drops out? I mean, it's that boom and bust cycle that happens every 8 to 10 years or whatever. And so I try to tell folks, like, if you're already small and you've only got, I just say it this way: hold back 10% and sell that direct. Start building your customer base, because if the bottom drops out and you got a customer base, you're not so worried about what's happening at the auction. But if your only buyer is the auction, then you have way less control over your future. You're always subject to that. So if they're just getting started direct, I say hold back 10% and start building a direct to consumer business. Sell the rest that you need to at the auction, but start building that consumer direct, because attrition, your turnover is going to be a lot slower when you have 100 customers. You might lose 1 or 2 a month, but you'll probably replace them with 1 or 2 a month. So you've got a consistent customer base. Whereas if you've got one and it's the sell barn, and that's being manipulated by the markets, you go there one day and it's worth something. You go there the next day and it's not. I mean, we saw the volatility of the futures like crazy towards the end of 2025, with, different comments made by the administration and whatnot. Not even the administration.
Well, and if you've ever sat in on a sale too, like the sales barns post their top 20 prices. Like they're not posting the ones that people were yelling from the gallery, like, get that thing's got blah, blah, blah. And then it ends up selling for half of what, the top price was.
Yeah.
That's one thing I always, it's a difficult thing when we're trying to buy cattle from people. Like I go out to a farm and they got a bunch of different colors out there. They have different breeds. And they say, well, I can get $4,000 for this cow at the sales barn.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to, I'm like, all right, well, go get it then, because I know for a fact that white cow is not getting what, because they want black,
Yep.
and they're going to ding you, and you're not going to be happy with it. But that's the prices that they have heard about, because, you know, a lot of these people who have a lot of cattle, they're not probably spending a lot of time in a sales barn
Right.
to understand that.
Right. Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. So I like you, I agree. I think, you know, the folks that need to get what they need to because they've been running at a shortfall for years, I don't blame them. Go make it. The money's being made right now. But if you have any capacity to hold off and start growing your own customer base, I think long term that's the best thing that you could do. I mean, look, the
If
people
anything, right now is the best time to do it,
yeah,
because you have both options. And at some point in the future, you know, 4 years ago, you did not have both options.
yep. The person that controls the end consumer is the one that controls the market.
Yeah.
And so if you want to if you really want to stick it to them, start building and controlling your own customer base. You know, it's like Biden made $60 million available for the MPP-EP grants during his administration to build new slaughterhouses, to expand slaughterhouses. And many of them went bankrupt because the consumer, they didn't have a customer base. Customer base didn't follow. I think one of our biggest threats in the near future is Walmart getting into the beef game. Why? Because now Walmart has more power, in my opinion, than the big four, because they have Walmart supercenters all over our entire country. You know, the big four,
they're selling grass-fed beef,
yeah,
and they're labeling it grass-fed beef.
yeah, and they bought a slaughterhouse, and they are buying feedlots, and they're buying cow calf operations, and so, you know, the big four sold into the grocery chains, but
Yeah.
the new player is the grocery chain. So to me, it just points to the value of that customer connection, having those customers that trust you, you serve them, and that creates stability. But it's a
Yeah,
huge
I'm
lift.
looking at Walmart right now. I obviously don't buy beef, but you got a organic grass-fed ground beef, 85% lean, $6.72 a pound. Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah.
U.S. inspect. So like my theory is, what is that? Number one, like, what type of animal is that?
Yep.
And number two, where did they get it?
Yeah.
Like, is that from America or not?
I just saw a post yesterday from a producer that is partnered with them, and they are selling their beef into that supply chain. It's an American producer. Now, I'm looking at that saying, oh,
But how is the producer making enough money if they're selling it for $6.72 a pound, even if they're only making 50 cents a pound on that? Like,
yeah, that's the part I was trying to figure out, is what are the other partnership arrangements that producer has that makes it worth it being involved.
so what type of producer was that? What was he raising?
Angus. Yep.
Because, like, my idea is like, okay, well, that's an organic dairy cow that got retired.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of that they'd be able to sell at that price.
Yep.
And maybe that guy, you know, because you'd probably see like Angus organic grass-fed beef on there if it was, and it probably would be a little bit higher then. But I mean, when you see these prices for ground beef, cheap ground beef, like, those animals are not the ones that you see out on pasture. Like, they're like 10-year-old dairy cows that have been in a shelter for their whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can still call organic grass-fed ground beef if it's at an organic farm, and who knows what their grass-fed, you know, it's USDA certified grass-fed, so there is some regulations there.
Yeah.
But they could have been feeding them or alfalfa cubes.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a dairy group right now, and I don't have all the details. I haven't had the time to really read into it, but there's a dairy group right now pushing for $1,600 cull cow purchases funded by the federal government.
Right. That's concerning, because that's going to flood our beef market.
Yep. That's right.
And like, you think about a dairy producer, like, they are getting a ton of money for cull cows right now.
Yeah.
Even just, you know, take a dairy steer to finish, that's an amazing value for them.
Yep.
But it's a little bit scary to say that the government's going to help accelerate that, you know, instead of, you know, is it the best idea for us to be getting, like, dairy cows are not, like, Holstein cows are not meant to be finished on grass. Like,
right.
I would question how they would be be able to do that if it wasn't in a feedlot setting with some, like I said, alfalfa cubes that are souped up or something.
Yep. I guess they did this in the 80s. The same thing, that something with the dairy culls, and it tanked the market because it flooded, got flooded with beef. And that's one of the things that I think still needs to be understood by the administration is that, because they keep talking about bringing down the cost of food for consumers. Well,
It's my number one annoyance with
Yep.
them.
Yep.
They've done a lot of good things, but then like Brooke Rollins was on a press conference last week talking about, well, you can go find a chicken and eggs and you can have a $3 meal right now at the grocery store. It's like, why would you even say that? It's a counter, like you're hurting a farmer by saying that. You're putting in the consumer's mindset that they could have this cheap food,
That's right.
and nobody wins on that.
No, especially
except
when
the big dogs.
Yeah, especially when the problem is the cost to produce the food because of the cost of inputs. So if you want to fix the cost of food, bring down the fuel costs, create, maybe tax incentives or something. I'm not saying this is what they should do, but do what's necessary so that the producer's cost of production is lower. Until they fix that, because at one point, it was like, well, they're making 100 and it's like 174% increase in what they were doing a couple of years ago. Well, yeah, so is all the other things that they're buying to produce it. All the other things.
You had a world of farmers who were willingly not making that much money on that product.
Yep.
And now they have a chance to have a profit.
That's right.
And we're trying to move backwards on it.
Yeah. That's the thing that concerns me the most is that who's in charge in 3 years? I mean, who's in charge in midterms? That's.
And I hate. Well, and it's like everyone wants to turn, like when the eggs thing was happening. It's like that's some sort of a finger on the economy, as if the eggs are expensive or not.
Yeah.
It's like get the food out of your mouth. Like stop talking about it. Just let food be part of a capitalistic system where the consumer pays the fair value so that everyone makes money in the line. And it's not just one person making money.
Yep. Informed choice. That's what needs to happen. And then let the market work.
Yeah. From a policy standpoint, is there anything that you could see that would help fix some of these issues with, say, processing or producers, making some more money in the end? Like, is it too regulated the way it is right now? Because I still think, it's kind of like the chicken idea. Like I can slaughter, I don't know what number is here in Wisconsin. I think it's 1,000 chickens on farm.
Yeah.
I would do everything in my power to make sure the consumer is getting the best deal. Now, if you trickle that up, like if you had the same rules where someone could process 100,000 chickens, I could see corners getting cut.
Yep.
So the regulations are probably necessary in some ways. But can we get somewhere like with beef and hogs, where that is something that on our protein side, where like you do trust the farmer, like the farmer and the consumer have a handshake agreement that they're attempting to give you the best product. Like can I have a mobile slaughter person come out here and slaughter and process 10 animals a year?
Yep. Yeah, there's quite a few policies, of course, that because we're where we're at, we're in the situation we're in because of our regulatory agencies. They're the ones who put us here. We had the creation of the USDA and the Department of Interior ultimately is what led us to where we're at now, and the policies they put in place, right? So on the processing side, I explained it like this: take the same number of NFL referees that you have in the NFL and put that number of refs in the octagon for UFC. You're never going to have a fight because there's way too many eyeballs at every single corner. That's what it's like as a small USDA slaughterhouse compared to the big ones. You've got large-scale slaughterhouses that have almost the same number of inspectors that I have at my small slaughterhouse. But yet that one inspector, because I'm much smaller, they're watching every single animal. You go to the big slaughterhouses, there's no way they're watching every single animal when they've got rail speeds that are precisely, designed for optimal output. That inspector isn't inspecting all of that meat.
So how do they decide how many USDA inspectors are in the plant? Is it based off the amount of animals that are getting processed that week?
It's based on size of the plant. So
Like square footage?
number, yeah, like you said, number of animals, like how many you're
Yeah.
processing. And right now there's very small, and large. And I'm going to mess this up, but the small is something like, to be considered small, it's like 10 head of cattle a week. Again, I'm going to probably mess these numbers up, but it'll get you over the bullseye, and then go listen to somebody else to help you hit it. But
Yeah.
from small to large goes from like 10 to 400. And there's no middle. And actually, that was a discussion we had in DC with FSIS, is that definitions need to be done to where it actually represents the size of slaughterhouse. Because it just puts you in a higher, if you get over 10, all of a sudden now you're seen as a large scale under the same scrutiny, but you're not that big. You're not doing 100 a day or a week or whatever. So regulatory burdens with inspectors needs to be worked on, which is being done. Greg Gunthorpe was in a meeting with me in DC with Secretary Rollins and FSIS, and he just texted me a couple days ago, and he goes, they're actually listening. They got this. There's a thing called an ombudsman. I do not know what that is, but that was something that Greg asked for. I think it means that if you're the plant and you know you're right, the problem is right now, if I know I'm right, according to my HACCP and all of my rules, it's now we're just butting heads with me and the USDA, and I'm being held up. There needs to be something in place where I know I'm right. I'm running this slaughterhouse. It's my business. I'm right. It's in my HACCP. You should not be able to stop me. Or I should have an immediate ability to correct it with your higher up, not wait a week, not wait until that person's available. So that's those regulatory burdens, those are being changed. From public land side, we need more cattle on public land. In 1935, when they initiated the Taylor Grazing Act, we had 18 million AUMs, cow calves. 18 million in the West. Now we're down to 8 million because of environmental terrorist ENGOs that are making cows the problem for the environment, when we all know that's a bunch of BS. And so they do this whole sue and settle thing. They've been doing it for decades, where Western Watershed will sue the BLM because of the sage grouse. They don't have to prove it. They just have to make the complaint. Now it's the rancher's responsibility to go and fight that. Well, they don't, because they can't afford the attorneys and the lengthy battles. So the BLM comes back and says, hey, Rancher X, you lost the battle, so we're cutting your AUMs in half. You used to have 1,000 AUMs for your lease. Now you only have 500. So that's what's happened over decades. University of Idaho just released a 10-year study that said cattle actually benefit sage grouse and enhance their environment. They don't hurt it. But the Western
I'm sure
Waters,
it comes down to management.
Yeah, it comes down to management. But the person that made the claim didn't have to prove that. They just had to make the claim, and then they won. So what needs to happen is,
and that's where like NRCS could come in, and you have these supposed trained professionals in that, like they should go out and take a look.
Well,
because
we used to have
is
local grazing boards. So the ranchers in the area were called on the board, and they managed that. It wasn't somebody in DC that has no clue what Nevada, Utah, Arizona, you name it, what they're dealing with. So it needs to go back into the hands of the local producers for them to self, manage. There's
I mean, we've all drove past pastures that are, eaten down to the dirt. So like people are able, or I would feel sick if mine looked like that, but people are willing to do something like that. Like how is something, on public lands? Because in our area, I argue, CRP should be grazed once a year, and it would open up a ton of grazing land. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, you don't want to turn it into, a bunch of grazing down to the dirt. Like the producer needs to be responsible in some ways. So like, how does that get regulated then?
I think, like you're saying, through NRCS, there are tools now available that can provide real time data of soil nutrient health, of water infiltration. Utilizing these new technologies that actually work as the guardrails. And I think another part of it is education. Like the land grant universities were funded by chemical corporations, so they taught what mattered to them. Just like the pharmaceutical world educated our doctors, and so they taught how to prescribe pharmaceuticals. So we've got to go all the way back to the people that are teaching producers how to produce. Where that's relevant, of course. My family have all done it how they've done it, and it was handed down from generation to generation. But the knowledge we now have on time, duration on pasture and rotation and so forth. There's a lot of information that's now available that I can tell you from experience on my family's side. They've never even heard many of these conversations. It's just not knowledge that was ever put out. And when we had Utah Soil Health Conference 2 years ago, had Alejandro Carrillo as a guest, and it was amazing because Alejandro comes from an environment that's got way lower rain than the people in Utah. So when he comes in and says, here's my pastures, here's our rainfall, here's how I did it, they're like, oh man. And so a lot of folks, that was their first introduction to that management style. And now they're starting to make those changes because they got the right information. Context matters too, because if we would have brought Will Harris out to speak, they wouldn't even have heard him. They wouldn't even have bothered to open their ears to hear the process, because they're going to just sit there and think, well, Will gets 40 inches of rain every year. That works for him, not me. And Will would be the first person to tell you, don't send me there. I don't raise cattle in the desert. Somebody else could, help them a lot better. So it all comes back to, just like for the consumer, same for the producer, continue to expand knowledge and information on how things can be done. Because I've got friends that are doing regenerative. Their neighbors look at them like they're nuts, and yet their pastures are amazing. Their finishing on their animals are incredible. Their soil health is incredible. This guy in particular I'm thinking of, he's like, I'm just going to do it, and when they're ready, they can come and talk to me. Right now, I'm the pariah, but at some point, and he goes, already little by little, folks that wouldn't give me the time of day on in regards to what I'm doing are starting to ask, man, how's your pastures look so good? That opens up the dialogue for him to say, well, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question. I mean, you look at some of these public lands. So like in my perspective, we have these CRP, and you go past these CRP fields. Number one, the government is paying for that every year.
Yeah.
Number two, they're not really that healthy, because you really just have this stale, stagnant grassland that's not being managed, besides being mowed or burned once every 4 years. As part of that program, when they start someone on that, you can include fencing costs, water line cost, and a grazing plan. Even if an animal just touches that land once a year, the farmer gets paid for the CRP payment. Maybe it's a little bit less than what they have to pay right now, and you could, over time, the government is kind of at a wash for more of those upfront costs initially. But to me, that's some of the biggest. Because could you imagine, like, the landowner that owns thousands of acres, they put in the CRP because they don't want to deal with anything, in the future. They get a check from the government every year. If they would, put fencing in, and then they could charge a little bit of a rent for a grazer to come in there and hit it once a year, then that landowner is making even more money.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan of these programs. I mean, there's even guys that I've heard of that buy a big ranch in the West. They have one cow that's not even on the ranch, but it's registered to them and their brand. And then they apply for, rain insurance with that one animal. And then they get the insurance.
I mean, that is the root of the problems here, is that there's people that take advantage of them all.
Yep. And then they get that insurance money, and then they go buy another ranch and do the same thing. And they're not producing. They're just landowners, and they found a way to buck the system to make a bunch of money when other producers are busting their ass to actually feed America.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you see all this playing out? Like what is the solution to, because we kind of land in the educational space. Um, and I think, we have some of the best education on this,
Yeah.
but, like we don't really, we don't have the government dollars to go give people essentially, like, because like you have these free field days, right? That people show up, they get a free lunch. Like what is really being accomplished there? And we've kind of set towards, bringing in really high quality type education, making people pay for it. Number one, because it's an actual investment to them. They take it more seriously. They're not just coming to get a free lunch. Um, but then you have the people, it's like, well, I can go down to my field day next week and it's free.
Yeah.
So you have this, we're in an industry too, where it's like this mash of people getting a bunch of information for free. Who knows if it's high quality? I think, our businesses where I'm telling you, the farmer, that we're going to provide high level education, you're willing to pay us for it. We're not pulling money from other external sources like chemical companies or
Yep.
companies who are steering our information. So like, how do you see us? Like, if you were to give me advice, like, how does the education system get through to all these farmers without taking a bunch of government money and money from companies who want to skew our message?
Yeah, man, that's a good question, because I feel like it's a hard question, because you said without government money, because initially I'm thinking grants to educate, right? And maybe
Which, yeah, we could go do that. That's what a lot of these nonprofits do. They have grant writers as employees.
Yep, that's right.
But then,
Yeah, then read the
where's the value exchange?
Yeah, read the fine.
We're not. Then this company is not. Like right now, our base, like, it's just like a farmer. Like, you want to grow a good crop or grow good meat that the consumer's happy with. Right now, we have to provide valuable information or we're not a business.
Yep.
If we're propped up by something else, where's, if I leave or if I die or something happens and this company goes into a different person's hands, they could easily pivot into that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I share those concerns with my company.
But then where's the motivation to provide legitimate value?
Yep. Yeah. I think where it goes is we've got 3 more years with this administration, and some of the initial work that they've been getting going. Last year, my observation was a year of collecting knowledge and data. Just my observation of what the USDA administration is doing, and even HHS, because we had a few of those meetings with people they would have never heard from. We're talking, we brought the everyday small family farmer or processor that never gets a seat at the table because they're not part of a big trade organization, or at least one that's got their foot in the door with the administration, right? And so these are the people that are in the meetings and they're listening. So that was 2025. 2026 looks like they're circling back around to start putting the foundations behind these, expanding public land grazing, reducing the regulatory burdens for small processors. I know that there's some talk about making online sales of state inspected meat available across state lines to ease the burden there, right? That's hell. If I can drive across the border as a consumer and buy it from you, why can't I make that same decision from my computer at my house? Save me the drive. I'm the consumer. This is what I want to buy. So there's those kinds of conversations. So if they keep going the next few years and start implementing the things that the people that they've been talking to, the independents, family farmers and ranchers that they've been telling is the problem, then I think we see the momentum. But what needs to happen, again, is consumer education. When the consumer starts demanding a higher quality, nutrient-dense food that's raised a certain way, the market will follow, right? Because that's what markets do. They follow where the money is. And so consumer education, I think, is one of the most important things that we should be doing. Partly because if 86% of our producers are small, okay, making loans available at 3% or lower fixed, yeah, that'll help on the expansion side. But ultimately, what would help me is to sell my product, to have it sold out, whether I'm selling it, no matter where I'm selling it, but having local food sold out. And that requires knowledge. And that's the fastest way to put revenue into a producer's pocket without grants, without loans, without, all of the things. Just help me sell what I'm growing that my neighbors should know about. And so I think that's a something that should be done. How they do it, I don't know. If it's a
Yeah, that's my next question. So what's the platform? Because I could see us, we've had a lot of people request this where, if we do shift maybe a section, like take some of the farmer education and package it in a way for consumers. Like we have all the information that's needed for people.
the checkoff.
But then, yeah. So then what is the education? Like where are they consuming? Is it just, you make simple, because you have to dumb it down,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
You make simple social media content that attracts people and pulls them in.
Yeah, that is it. You have to understand the human psychology is an important aspect to understand. We used to have 7 seconds to capture somebody's attention. Now, mobile, it's 1.5 seconds. Desktop is 2 seconds to hook them. And if we as the educators don't acknowledge that and lean into that, we're going to make content that doesn't go anywhere. We're going to create educational course material that nobody ever bothers to look at because we never connected with them in the first place. So like, my Instagram, I'm almost 200,000 followers. I'd be more if I cared. I hate social media, but I have kind of learned, like I can go on now and do a topic and get a few 100,000 engagements because I know I have 2 seconds to say a hook. I mean, this is really what it is. 2 seconds. My first 2 seconds of my video is a hook that's going to get my target audience to listen. And then I give some of the details. They call that the body. So you got your hook, then you got your body, which is the details that you want them to know, but they're not sticking around unless you gave them a hook. And then you have the closing. And you got 60 to 90 seconds to say all of the complicated things that you do, get that across. That's been my biggest challenge, but it's human psychology. If you want to connect, you have to know how that brain is working to get them to listen. And if you don't, you can be creating the most important, most valuable content that people should know that'll save their life, and they'll never hear it because you didn't know how to present it. It's like Jesus talking in parables. Why'd he talk in parables? So that people could understand the message. We just now have social media that's made our attention spans so dang short. And if we don't acknowledge that as creators, as people that are trying to inform our audiences, it won't go anywhere. So you said, where's that coming from? Well, the checkoff is already in place. It's just been bastardized. The checkoff already has the funds to, and the structure of the checkoff was for what we're talking about. And it's not being used that way.
And when you say checkoff, what do you mean?
The beef checkoff. Yeah. Are you familiar? Do you guys pay that where you're at? So the beef checkoff, depending on where you live, is $1 to $5 per head of animal you sell, required by law, to go into this fund. And the beef checkoff's whole entire purpose was to promote beef. That's where the beef is what's for dinner commercial came
maybe
from.
I am. I don't really know.
Yeah. So, well, I wouldn't be surprised. I asked my cousin, like, how much do you hate the checkoff? And he goes, AJ, I have to pay so many other stupid bills. I don't even notice the checkoff. Yeah, I don't want to pay it. It's stupid. It's not doing anything for me. But he's like, I just got a bill from the state of Nevada for this much money just for being in operation. Like, all I can do is just work harder to cover those bills. I don't have time to go and fight them. So the beef checkoff was designed to promote beef. Now it's not. The NCBA gets a bunch of that money. A lot of it goes towards their overhead, their employees and stuff like that. But yeah, so some of those infrastructures were designed, and I think the beef checkoff is a good plan if it was used appropriately. If that money, millions of dollars actually went back into marketing the producers in America to American consumers, you've got the budget right there to start growing the demand.
Who controls the fund?
I think it's federally controlled, and then in states too. So like someplace like the federal beef checkoff, and if I'm off on this, or some of the listeners, just give me some grace. I've got a lot of inputs coming in, but the feds is $1, and then each state assesses their own if they choose to. So you pay $1 to the feds, and then $1.50 goes to the state. That $1.50 stays for the state to do what they need to do with it for the promotion of ag. or beef, and then the feds are supposed to use it for whatever. But then third-party organizations like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the NCBA, can apply for that and receive that as essentially a grant to go and then do the work, which is supposed to be to promote beef.
Yeah. It's just difficult to expect good results from the government.
Yeah, 100%.
It is.
Yep.
It is. And it's it's like the NRCS thing where we had 750 million put in towards, and they're talking about regenerative. But we've got to find a system, whether the government has to kind of help us get there because we've been put here because of it, because of the subsidies. But we've got to find a system that's somewhat disconnected from the government handouts.
That's right. Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah. I mean, great input on as far as communication to consumers too. I think one unfortunate thing with social media, if you actually are paying attention to how to get traffic and how to get traction, is it awards negativity a lot more, and challenge people to, if you do go down that road, do the hook, do the body of the talk, but then finish it with some sort of solution. We can get caught up in ag where it's just negative, 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 and you might get the numbies on the social medias because of it. But I don't know if we're really solving any. We're exposing some of the things behind the curtain, but
Yeah,
I always, try to provide a solution at the end.
yeah. That's actually why I don't post as much as I used to, because negativity breeds engagement, and I hate that. Because then in my own world, I'm just sitting there talking about all the bullshit and not the things that work, just to, like you said, get those numbers for reach. And I'm like, this is this is so dumb. So
it's the biggest thing I struggle with too. It's just difficult because you see the people who have the massive accounts, and you might see 3 or 4 posts in a row, and it's just this negative thing.
Yeah.
But we have to have hope too.
Yes.
In ag, you need to have hope that we're going to come out of, find a better solution.
Yeah.
And it's not like our ancestors had it easy. We're not the first generation who had to have some off-farm jobs to make things work.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I will say that I have felt more hopeful last year that we are going the right direction than I have in a long time.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not they can pull it off, and whether or not there's special interests that stop things from happening, but that's why the benefit of social media is the ability to cut around all of these blockades and go right to the consumer. So I believe at this point in history, as big of a problem social media is, it's also been a major blessing that we have that reach, because
it helps you take the shackles off. You're not relying on other people. Imagine what it would take. I think about it with our business in Acres too. Like, this business looked massively different. It was founded in 1971. Those guys were in an office building in a city, actually like typewriting and writing out the articles and printing them. With technology now, we can reach millions of people, and it isn't just coming from the magazine or these books. Like, you can reach millions of people, and it's a gift and a curse.
You guys have a consumer focus, a consumer arm, or are you primarily all producers?
We really don't. We're all I mean, we attract a lot of consumers that are, I would say the like really interested consumers.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really have a consumer arm, and that's something that like anyone that looks at a business, you can't do everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, I think number one most important thing, I just bought it 2 years ago. Number one is providing the producers high level education.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yep.
And when I feel like we've solved that, or we're doing well with it, and we have this engine that keeps pushing out really good information education, then the consumer education would probably come next, because I think you can regurgitate a lot of this information into a simpler type of deliverable for consumers, and it'd probably be beneficial.
Yeah. Well, and then the more consumers that are educated on what you're teaching, so they have a demand for that production style, I'll use that as a description, that's just going to bring more momentum. And I ask that because the things that get the most reach for me with consumers is policies around food, which
it's the same with us, same
Yeah.
with farmers, honestly.
yeah, totally. And I feel like
I hate that too, kind of.
yeah, I know.
You got to be political to get a
Yeah. People, when they say food is not political, I'm like, well, I don't know about that. Food is pretty dang, I mean, it shouldn't be, but it's pretty dang political. So,
yeah, 100%.
but yeah, I see it like the invisible army. The more consumers and producers that you can bring together, then the demand is for this, not for this. And it's numbers. I mean, the people that get the biggest voice have the most members behind them because of their influence. So that's why I was wondering if you guys do much on the consumer education side yet. And I agree with you. You can't do everything, or you're not going to do anything good. But
right, yeah. But I think it's something we need to look at in the future, and whether that's just partnering with people like you or other type of people on social media who do good consumer education. That's definitely possible too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I know we've gone pretty long. Is there anything else you want people to look for? Where can they find you? Where do you want to send folks after this?
Yeah. If you are a producer selling direct to consumer, or you want to, we would love to have you join From the Farm. We've got you can join for free, sell your product there. And then we have a higher level tier. It's $50 a month that has a couple of other features, but we've tried to keep it. We know who our audience is. We know who we're serving. So we've tried to keep that in mind. So we'd love to have you. Fromthefarm.org, scroll to the bottom. There's a link that says become a producer. And we would just love to have you join the team. We're driving a lot of traffic, but what we're learning is we don't have enough inventory from our producers to keep people coming back. So that's kind of a challenge that we're working on, but we'd love to serve you. That's what we're here to do. Basically our mission is producer first, consumer second, and then we're third. And we believe if we serve from that perspective, then we can create something that's great. We've got some podcasts that are on From the Farm USA on YouTube that you can jump in, a couple of interviews there with different producers and folks. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I tried to get out to Acres this year, but I didn't make it. So I'll be out there next year.
We'll get you next year. We're going into Iowa City, Iowa. So we're going right into the heart of the beast. So we need as many people there as we can.
Nice. I love it.
Make some noise.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experience.